Horrors of Disneyland. Lock in. I don't like the creepy music off the start. Come on, let's. Okay. Epcot hostage situation. What? Okay, Epcot. Very nice.
On the evening of Saturday, September 12, 1992,
I wasn't
Alan
even born.
Ferris walked through the front gates at Epcot. He was 37 years old. He was dressed like anyone else, blending in easily with the thousands of tourists moving through the entrance plaza that night. He did not look dangerous. Didn't even look out of place. He simply looked like another guest carrying a bag. At that time, getting into a Disney park was a frictionless experience. There were no metal detectors, there were no security tents, and no mandatory bag checks. You would park your car, presented a ticket at the turnstile, and walked right in.
Back then, life
walked
was
into
so
the
simple.
park, carrying a dark duffel bag, and inside that bag was a fully loaded 12-gauge sawed-off shotgun and a handful of extra shells. He would navigate through the crowds of families, walking past the ambient lighting, the carefully maintained flower beds.
This video is like a dark turn very, very fast. Very, very fast.
And the popcorn carts. But he was not there to ride anything. He was there to find a specific woman. By the late summer of 1992, Alan's personal life had entirely unraveled. He had recently gone through a severe, messy breakup. His ex-girlfriend, working as a security guard inside Walt Disney World. The separation had broken him. He was unable to let the relationship go, and over the course of several weeks, his behavior had become desperate and erratic. He stalked her, harassed her. He had already survived a suicide attempt in the wake of the breakup. His actions escalated to a point where his ex-girlfriend went to the local authorities for protection. She filed for and received a legal restraining order against him. The court order was meant to be a hard physical boundary, a legal mandate requiring him to stay away from her home, and her place of work. But a restraining order is just a piece of paper, and it only works if the person it targets still cares about the consequences of breaking the law. But as for Alan, he had reached a point where he no longer cared about jail time, fines, or his own future. He knew exactly where she worked. He knew her shift schedule. He even knew the layout of the theme park. A theme park operates on the unspoken assumption that the real world, that with its domestic disputes, its violence, and its unpredictability, cannot cross into the theme park. Guests and employees naturally assume that they're inside a protected bubble. Alan carried his bag through the crowds, walking right past the invisible boundary of the restraining order, bringing a deadly weapon directly into the place where she was supposed to be the most secure. A theme park completely transforms after the sun goes down and the closing announcements begin. The cheerful background music continues to play from the hidden speakers. The noise of the crowd slowly drops away, and as Epcot officially closed for the night, the operations team began their standard routine. The rides were powered down, the maintenance crew began dragging out the hoses to wash the walkways, and the security guards began their nightly sweeps to ensure all the guests had left.
So
But
he
Alan
stayed late night?
had not left. He had stayed inside the park, lingering in the shadows near the pavilions, waiting for the crowds to thin. He was eventually spotted as unarmed Disney security guards were doing their exterior sweeps. They saw a man lingering in an area that was supposed to be clear. They approached him, likely intending to tell him the park was closed and guide him toward the front gates. But Alan did not wait for them to speak. He unzipped his bag and he pulled out his 12-gauge sawed-off shotgun,
That's insane.
racked the slide, and leveled it at the approaching guards. And he pulled the trigger. The blast echoed violently across the empty concrete of the park. He pumped the shotgun and fired again, scattering the unarmed guards. He fired 3 times in total, but he actually didn't hit them. But he didn't need to.
He just wanted
The
to warn
deafening
them.
sound of a shotgun was enough to force the guards to dive for cover and scramble for their radios. With the guards falling back, Alan retreated. He moved quickly into the Journey into an Imagination pavilion.
At that point, you're just a mentally ill person. Like, what's your plan there? You're just shooting shotgun shells for no reason because you're just provoked.
It was a massive structure, defined by striking geometric glass pyramids, designed to celebrate creativity and childhood wonder. And now, with the interior lights dimmed and all the guests gone, it was just a quiet, echoing building. Alan slipped inside through a set of doors and moved into one of the pavilion's public restrooms on the first floor. The space was bright. The fluorescent lights buzzed softly overhead. He stood in the quiet room, chambered a fresh round, and waited in the silence.
What was his plan?
Not everyone in the park knew what had just happened outside. While the exterior guards were radioing in the active shooter situation, 2 other Disney security guards were already inside the Journey to Imagination pavilion during their routine sweeps. In the early 1990s, Disney security guards were entirely unarmed. They only carried radios and flashlights.
That's kind of dumb. I feel like Disney security, even in 1990, knowing America's gun laws, should have been they should have been holding weapons.
Their primary training was in customer service. The 2 guards walked through the doors of the pavilion and pushed open the door to the public restroom. They expected to find empty stalls, and then move on to the next building, but as they opened the door, they walked directly into the barrel of a sawed-off shotgun. Alan Ferris was standing under the bright fluorescent lights, his feet planted, the weapon being leveled squarely at their chest. The guards froze, their hands went up instinctively, their mouths went completely dry.
Pre 9/11 America gave no Fs. That's so true. I mean, they said earlier in this video that they had no security to even get into Disneyland.
Staring down the massive dark bore of a 12-gauge shotgun from just a few feet away is an image that the brain struggles to process, especially when it happens inside a brightly lit restroom at Epcot. Alan backed him into the corner against the cold tile wall. He didn't ask for their wallets. He didn't ask for keys to the building.
He asked for his ex-girlfriend.
He kept his gun steady, stared at the 2 men, and gave them a single very clear order. He told them to use their radios. He ordered them to contact dispatch immediately and demand that his ex-girlfriend be brought down to this exact restroom.
That's insane. How do you even... I mean, obviously the only way to de-escalate the situation is to bring in police. There's nothing else you can do.
Standing just feet away from Alan, keeping his eyes locked on the gun, one of the guards slowly reached down to his belt, his hands shaking violently, unclipping the radio, and spoke into it, the man's voice echoing off the tile walls. He relayed the situation to the Central Security Office, telling him that they were trapped inside the restroom by a man holding a shotgun pointed at them, and he told them exactly who the man was demanding to see. Disney security immediately knew that they could not handle this internally.
Yeah, so you called the
They
cops.
locked down the immediate perimeter. They located the female guard Alan was asking for and secured her in a room on the other side of the property, far away from...
Secured in a room in the property? Get her out of the park, bruh! Get her out!
Of course, they were not going to give him what he wanted. And then they picked up their phone and called the Orange County Sheriff's Office. Within minutes, the perimeter of Epcot was completely swarmed. Heavily armed sheriff's deputies poured onto the property. Police cruisers completely surrounded the perimeter. Even SWAT officers, and they would form a tight tactical perimeter around the pavilion. The massive glass pyramids of the building reflected the strobing red and blue lights of the police vehicles parked on the concrete outside. It was now the early hours of Sunday, September 13th. Inside the bright tiled restroom, the passage of time slowed down to an agonizing crawl. The hostage portion of the standoff lasted roughly 10 minutes, but for the 2 guards backed against the wall, it felt like hours. They were
Wait, so how long was this guy actually in there for?
trapped in a windowless box. Every sound in the room was magnified. They could hear the heavy, nervous breathing of the man holding the gun. They watched Alan's hands constantly, watching his finger resting on the trigger guard. A sawed-off shotgun is heavy, and holding it chest height takes a physical toll. Every time Alan shifted his weight, every time his arm got tired and the barrel dipped or raised a fraction of an inch, the guards flinched, bracing for a blast that would completely tear them apart. Outside, police negotiators established contact, telling Alan they had the building surrounded. They were trying to reason with him and trying to de-escalate the situation. Alan paced in the small space. The manic adrenaline from firing the shots outside was beginning to burn off, leaving behind a heavy, suffocating exhaustion. He was sweating, looking at the door repeatedly, and then back to the 2 guards, and he started muttering disjointed fragments of sentences, and the minutes dragged on. The sirens had completely stopped, replaced by the heavy organized movements of tactical teams stacking up outside the doors. Alan listened to the sounds outside. The reality of the situation finally settled over him. He had bypassed security, brought the gun inside, fired shots and taken hostages. But the police were absolutely not going to bring his ex-girlfriend to an armed, unstable man. The two guards watched his body language begin to change. His shoulders dropped. The heavy barrel of the shotgun lowered slightly toward the floor, and he stopped pacing. He looked at the two men pressed against the tile. They were just two guys in polo shirts, sweating through their collars, waiting to be killed over a relationship they had nothing to do with. And Alan made his choice. He told the guards to get out, and they didn't hesitate. They backed away slowly, keeping their hands completely visible until they were past the threshold of the door.
So he basically just gave up.
They walked quickly out of the building, and as soon as they crossed the police perimeter, their legs nearly gave out. They were physically unharmed, but they were entirely drained. They had just survived the most terrifying 10 minutes of their entire lives. With the hostages now clear, the entire dynamic of the standoff shifted. Alan Ferris was now completely alone, and being surrounded, he had nowhere to go. Deputies outside gave him clear verbal commands.
Would have been hugging the floor after getting out? Yeah. Apparently it was only 10 minutes though. I'm sure the stress and the trauma of that situation would like just physically and mentally exhaust you.
Telling him to put the weapon down on the floor. Telling him to walk out slowly with his hands empty. Alan did not answer the negotiators. He stood under the lights. He gripped the heavy wood of the stock, turned the barrel of the 12-gauge shotgun upward, and pointed it at himself.
Okay. Is this where this is going? I feel like I know what's gonna follow. I figured.
And he pulled the trigger.
Dude, what the fuck, man? This happened in Disney World Epcot.
The deafening sound of the gunshot violently filled the small tiled box. Sound echoed heavily outside the pavilion, rolling across the empty concrete walkways and bouncing off the surrounding structures. The deputies immediately rushed through the doors, clearing the building and pushing to the restroom with their weapons drawn, and they found Alan Ferris on the floor, the wound, of course, being massive and immediately fatal. There was no need to call for paramedics, and the standoff was over.
So like, what was his plan? Even if he did get with his ex-girlfriend, was his plan to like kill her and then kill himself? I mean, you never know with sick individuals like this.
It was the early hours of Sunday morning.
So yeah, what happened the day after? I want to know. Did they close down Disney or did they continue operations as usual? Let's find out, man.
The sun would come up in just a few hours. By 9 a.m., the front gates of Epcot would open again, and thousands of families would come pouring through the turnstiles, expecting a flawless, magical experience. Police processed the scene as fast as they legally could. Photographs were taken, the body was removed. The shotgun and shell casing were collected in evidence bags. And as soon as police cleared the room, the maintenance crew moved in.
Am I hearing this right? They just open up the park immediately the next day right after? Someone commits suicide, blows their brains out inside this bathroom, and next thing you know, boom, clean it up. All right, back in business.
They worked silently and rapidly in the dark. The restroom was closed off as they scrubbed the tile, washed down the walls, and sterilized the space. And when the park opened on Sunday morning, it opened exactly on time.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my, not even a delay. That's insane, bro. Dude, think about the workers. Do they not have any trauma? Like, you don't want to give them a day off? Hey, man, a couple of your coworkers were held hostage. You know, the guy that held them hostage shot his brains out. But yeah, we expect you to clock back in tomorrow.
Families were now walking past that pavilion and had absolutely no idea what had just happened hours earlier. And internally, the reality of what Alan Ferris had done created a permanent shift. It was a turning point that eventually led to the modern era of theme park security, the addition of bag checks, metal detectors, and a heavier police presence.
That makes sense. I'm glad he didn't kill anyone else. Yeah, I mean, as shitty as it is to say, this is like, no, I wouldn't say best case scenario, because this could have been handled by like the police like capturing him and just taking him to jail or something. But like, at least no one else got hurt. At least the idiot who brought a shotgun to Disney World got hurt.
Millions of people have walked through that specific pavilion in the decade since 1992. Every single day, guests stand at those sinks and wash their hands, looking in the mirror completely.
This This bathroom still exists, by the way. You could walk in this bathroom knowing that I can't even say the word, somebody offed themselves in this bathroom. What?
Completely unaware that where they were standing was the exact spot where that illusion of safety broke down entirely, and where a desperate man decided to end his own life.
Bro. Oh my god. All right. Next story. Pluto and the parade float.
There is a literal and physical boundary at every single theme park. It is the line that separates the bright, carefully controlled fantasy the guests pay to see from the heavy industrial reality that actually makes it run.
True.
Usually, this boundary is nothing more than a pair of large wooden gates or a thick wall of trees. If you step to one side, completely surrounded by cheerful music, the clean sidewalks, and the perfect architecture. Go to the other side, and the music instantly starts to fade, and is replaced by the hum of generators and the sight of raw concrete staging areas. Javier Cruz spent his working life crossing back and forth over that line.
Okay.
He was 38 years old.
38.
He worked at Magic Kingdom in Walt Disney World, Florida. He had a family at home, including 2 children who knew exactly what their father did for a living. And his job was to cross that line every single afternoon, to leave his own identity on the concrete and then become someone else. His job was a character performer. Specifically, he was Pluto.
I've been in one of these costumes, by the way. They get very, very hot, and they usually have like inbuilt fans in them to reduce the heat. But being in these costumes in a place like Florida would probably just absolutely like destroy you.
And by all accounts, Javier was deeply committed to his work. He'd been doing this for nearly 8 years, and he knew exactly what it took to bring that animated dog to life. And he also knew that physical toll that it demanded. Being a costume performer in Central Florida is incredibly demanding labor. When you put on a suit, you are encased in heavy layers of synthetic fabric and thick industrial foam. The temperature inside the costume can easily climb past 100 degrees on a warm afternoon.
Easily.
Meaning you sweat constantly. But the heat is only part of that challenge. The hardest part is actually navigating the world. When Javier put on the Pluto head, his vision was instantly reduced.
I didn't even think about that. I didn't realize how hard it is to even just like see through that costume, man.
He could only see through a tiny mesh screen hidden in the neck of the dog. He had absolutely no peripheral vision. If he wanted to look at something beside him, he had to physically turn his entire torso.
This kind of changes my whole look of like performers in amusement parks now. Because when I think of like Mario and Luigi walking into, you know, Epic Universe and I see them walking out and people are holding their hands to help them guide them where they're going, I then think twice. Wait, the guy in there is probably sweating his balls off and he probably can't see anything.
If he needed to look down, he had to tilt the massive heavy foam head forward. Not even mentioning that he had to wear oversized paws on his feet. They were long, wide, and clumsy. Walking normally was nearly impossible. Moving in the suit at all required a specific kind of stepping, almost like marching. You had to lift your knee up high, plant the heavy shoe flatly on the ground, and repeat the same motion just to keep yourself from tripping. But Javier was used to all of this. After 8 years, the awkward walk and the suffocating heat were just part of his muscle memory.
He did that for 8 years, bruh. Hot as hell and partially blind is ridiculous. Not only that, this guy could barely walk because of how heavy the paws were on the bottom. He had to walk like a he had to literally waddle.
And he knew pretty well how to navigate the crowds. On Wednesday, February 11th, 2004, the park was operating exactly as it always did. The weather was actually mild. The crowds were heavy, and the afternoon entertainment was running on schedule.
Okay.
At 3 o'clock every day, the Share a Dream Come True parade goes through the streets of the park. The parade featured dozens of walking performers, dancers, and a line of enormous elaborate floats. These floats were essentially rolling multi-level buildings. They were built on top of a heavy truck chassis, and they were covered in thousands of pounds of fiberglass, steel framing, and moving animatronic parts. And because they were entirely enclosed in the decorative shell, the drivers sat deep inside the structures. A driver inside of one of these floats sat in a small, isolated compartment. They navigated the tight parade route by peering.
So that's what it looks like. There's the driver is where the driver's inside the compartment. So the performer is inside this little encased thing. Okay, I see.
Through tiny hidden windows or small video monitors wired to external cameras, meaning they had massive blind spots. A driver inside one of those machines could not see the ground directly in front of their own wheels. Just before 3 o'clock, the parade cast gathered in the backstage staging area. It was located right behind the wooden gates near Splash Mountain. Cast members were getting into their starting positions and pulling the heavy character heads over their faces. Once the heads went on, they were no longer allowed to speak. They could only communicate with each other through exaggerated gestures, nods, and hand signals. Javier was fully dressed in the Pluto suit. His assignment for the specific parade was to walk near the front of the Beauty and the Beast float. This float was massive. It was a towering 3-part structure designed to look like a series of enormous snow globes. It carried several performers and weighed thousands of pounds. Javier took his position near the front of the vehicle, and the cue was given. The cheerful, upbeat parade music started blaring through the hidden speakers out in the park.
Okay.
The heavy wooden gate slowly swung open, and the parade officially started.
Wait, so chat, did I miss something? He's walking in front of the Beauty and the Beast parade. Is that what it is? Yeah, he is. Okay, so he's walking in front of the parade. He's in front of the Beauty and the Beast parade, and the guy behind him is a driver who has blind spots who can't see very well.
Walking characters always went out first, leading the large vehicles.
Okay.
Javier started moving forward toward the open gates, and behind him, the driver of the Beauty and the Beast float put the heavy machine into gear, and the massive structure started to roll forward.
Okay.
They were still in the backstage staging area. They were just approaching the open gates when something interrupted Javier's rhythm. Maybe the fabric of the costume shifted. Maybe the oversized paws caught an uneven patch of the concrete floor. But regardless, his foot was caught.
Oh no.
Falling forward hard onto the concrete. Inside the suit, he was entirely trapped, the foam head hitting the ground, jarring his already limited vision. He was lying on the pavement, encased in heavy padding, unable to easily bend his knees or use
I see where this is going. I don't like it. I don't like it.
his hands to push himself up. He had almost no visibility to see what was coming behind him. The loud parade music was echoing off the walls, and the diesel engine of the float was roaring right at his back. Even if he screamed for help, it was impossible to hear a human voice from inside the foam head.
Don't say IRL spring lock. This is something that actually happened to someone, Lunar. This isn't FNAF. This is real life.
Over the overwhelming noise of the staging area. And so, the Beauty and the Beast float kept moving forward. The driver had no way of knowing that a man had just fallen directly in the vehicle's path. Other cast members standing nearby saw the fall, and the panic was instant. Performers in full costume started waving their arms frantically, trying to get the driver's attention. Several people broke formation and rushed toward Javier, grabbing at the heavy yellow fabric of the suit, pulling desperately, trying to drag him clear of the tires. But they were simply not fast enough. The driver slammed on the brakes as soon as he realized what was happening in front of him. But a machine that heavy carries tremendous momentum. It cannot stop instantly, so it continued to roll forward. The third section of the massive float rolled directly over him.
Oh, but where though? Where though? Where did it roll over him?
The injuries were catastrophic and immediate. Javier Cruz died right there on the backstage pavement.
Oh, we've already experienced 2 deaths. I'm sorry, chat, if this is something that you guys aren't used to. This is very heavy. This is heavy stuff. Even I'm getting kind of like, damn.
The cast members who had just lunged forward to help him now stood over the body of their friend. The wooden gates were still open, and the music was still playing. Theme parks operate on a rigid, unrelenting schedule. A 3 o'clock parade happens at 3 o'clock. The guest experience is prioritized above almost anything else.
Okay,
and the tourists lining up on the street had almost no idea what was happening. The staging area was quickly swarmed by management. The area around Javier was secured, and the Beauty and the Beast float was immediately halted and pulled out of the lineup. And the rest of the parade was told to keep moving.
A man just died on your parade line, and they just said, hey man, keep parading on. Chat, this changes a lot of how I view Disney as a company. Both stories, after catastrophic events, Disney's just like, yo, I know you just saw a dude get run over, but can we lock in? Literally. Holy.
Cast members who had just watched Javier die in front of them, who were still processing the shock and the panic, were forced to turn away and continue. They had to adjust their costumes, they had to go back, they had to wave, had to dance, and act out their routines. The Occupational Safety and Health Administration immediately stepped in to investigate the accident. They shut down all parade operations at the park while they examined the safety protocols that allowed a performer to be crushed by his own float.
Okay, at least the park regulation thing or whatever shut down everything until they figured out safety regulations and stuff, but Disney should have done that in the first place.
The investigation revealed that the working conditions were simply too dangerous, and Disney was fined $6,300.
$6,300? That's it?
Which was a relatively small amount of money for the company. But
$6,300 for Disney World? That's like $1 for Disney, not even a cent for Disney. That's not even a cent for Disney. They make that in 30 minutes. They make $6,000 in 2 seconds. What are you talking about 30 minutes?
The accident forced permanent changes upon the entire theme park industry. Characters were no longer allowed to walk directly in the path of moving floats. The parks today are undeniably safer because of what happened to Javier, but those changes offer very little comfort to the people who were standing in the staging area that afternoon.
As messed up as both stories have been so far, both stories have improved park safety. You know, like there is, I guess, a silver lining in a way, but it's still so messed up.
They're the ones who had to carry the memory of what had just happened. Years later, that normal Wednesday morning would take on a very different meaning. A story began circulating online from someone who had been a guest in the park on that specific day. Or scrolling back through their old photos from their family vacation, they found a picture of themselves standing in the Magic Kingdom. They were smiling, laughing, and getting a warm hug from Pluto. They checked the time and date stamp on the digital file. It was taken the morning of February 11th, 2004. The person inside the suit, the person making them laugh and giving them a hug, was Javier.
That's insane.
It was a completely normal vacation for those guests. And it was a completely normal Wednesday morning for Javier's 2 children, who knew their dad was at work, making people smile. Just a few hours after that picture was taken, the heavy wooden gates opened. Javier stepped into the staging area and never came back out.
It shouldn't take someone bringing in a shotgun for them to check what you bring in. I said at the beginning of that story, those checks should have been in place in the first place. Even if it happened in 1992, knowing America's gun laws, like you should have like metal detectors and baggage checks from way back, man. But it seemed like everything only happened to take effect after like 9/11. Hidden in the Matterhorn.
Most people go to a theme park to escape reality. They want the bright colors, the cheerful music, and the comforting feeling that the outside world cannot reach them. But when the crowds leave and the music finally stops, what remains is completely different. Beneath the surface, the park is just a collection of heavy, unforgiving machinery. When the Matterhorn bobsleds opened in 1959, it was an unprecedented feat of engineering. The designers built a 147-foot artificial mountain out of timber and tubular steel, effectively dropping a piece of the Swiss Alps directly into Southern California. And for decades, it always delivered exactly what it was designed to do.
Shut down maybe after this, maybe.
Accompanied by the terrifying roar of a Yeti. The Matterhorn wasn't just an attraction, it was a massive, heavy structure relying on gravity and momentum. It had actually claimed real lives.
Oh my god, yeah, real lives. Not even one, multiple lives.
In May of 1964, a 15-year-old boy named Mark Maples
1964?
was riding the bobsleds with a friend. But as his car neared the very summit of the mountain, Mark unbuckled his seatbelt and stood up. He lost balance and was thrown from the bobsled, and he fell to the track beneath him. He suffered massive injuries and would pass away 3 days later.
Look, man, you know children are going to ride your rides. Why are you putting on equipment that people can just unbuckle in 2 seconds in the middle of a high-speed ride?
And then came January of 1980, where a 48-year-old woman named Dolly Young was riding the Matterhorn alone.
Okay, the name is wrong. It should be DeLeon. But in 1980.
where a 48-year-old woman named Dolly Young was riding the Matterhorn alone. As her bobsled sped through the pitch-black interior of the cavern, she was somehow thrown from her seat.
Bro, what?
She also landed directly on the tracks. The interior of the mountain is completely dark, making it impossible for the operators to see what had just happened. Before anyone realized she was missing from her bobsled, she was struck by a trailing car, dying instantly inside the cavern.
So I feel like nowadays, especially, if one person gets even as little as a tiny injury on a roller coaster, they shut that roller coaster down for like a year or two to like make sure everything's up to standards again. This bobsled was running for almost 20 more years after the first death, and then there was a second death. I guess the safety standards were just so much worse back then.
After each of these tragedies, the ride was shut down temporarily,
Okay.
and minor modifications were made to make it safer.
Okay, that makes sense.
And then the very next morning, when the sun came up, the ride would run again like nothing happened.
The very next morning. They were shut down temporarily, and the very next morning, they turned it back on. Not even like a week to fix things. Dude, we have a ride here, Cedar Point in Ohio. Cedar Point has this one ride. It's called Top Thrill Dragster, okay? It's like one of the fastest roller coasters in the world. It goes really fast up and really fast down, and it's one of the most fun rides you can ever sit on. This happened like, I think 2 or 3 summers ago. I don't even know if it was a screw, but it was like a piece of shrapnel, some metal. It wasn't a screw, it was like a piece of shrapnel and metal that came off of the ride, and it landed on a lady's head who was waiting in line. The ride was shut down for like a year. The lady got hit in the head. She had like minor injuries. Nothing really bad happened to her. But yeah, ride was shut down. Couldn't ride there. And then they reopened it. Like they reopened it recently. But people die in Disney, and the next day they're like, yeah, keep going, lock in. The reason I don't get scared on roller coasters is because I know you can't die on a roller coaster. This shit's been like safety tested multiple times by multiple dummies, multiple people. Like, you're not gonna die on them.
But the mountain also hides another thing. For years, the original Yeti animatronic was an opposing, aggressive figure. It was specifically designed to stun the viewer and give them fear right before the bobsled slipped away into the next tunnel. It was a masterpiece of tension. But as technology advanced and the machinery eventually breaks down, and when the park finally decides to upgrade to newer, more modern animatronics,
That Yeti jump scared me, bro. Same, low-key.
the original figures were removed. They're cataloged, wrapped up, and put into storage. And so, there was a backup for the original Yeti, a spare figure, built and kept off-site just in case the primary one ever failed. Cast members even called him Harold. And for years, he sat in a massive, poorly lit storage warehouse, gathering dust. And whenever an employee had to retrieve a piece of equipment, they would walk into the pitch-black room, flip on the lights, and would see him sitting in the far end of the room completely still.
I get so scared.
This would scare a lot of the employees. Workers would report that it felt like the massive creature had been watching the door the entire time. It would give the employees a strange feeling every time they had to walk into the warehouse alone. His synthetic fur was matted with years of neglect. You could see the exposed joints in his arms, the lifeless steel, and the motors were dead. Harold occupied that space for years. The company has never officially confirmed of what actually happened to the backup Yeti, so it's definitely possible that he was finally dismantled and sold for scrap parts, or just completely destroyed, or it could still be there.
Seen now in the queue for Guardians of the Galaxy. So he's in the Guardians of the Galaxy ride now, but not confirmed if it's Harold. Okay.
Sitting in the warehouse, waiting for the next employee to turn on the lights and see a terrifying sight.
I mean, good video. YouTube, if you guys enjoyed, please subscribe.